Hello and happy Halloween. This very special Halloween episode, I have one of the creepiest ghost stories of all time for you. Previously in part 1 of The Haunting of the Summerwind Mansion, Ginger Henshaw, her 4 children, and her new husband Arnold moved into the Summerwind in 1969. The historic estate sat on the shores of West Bay Lake in Wisconsin. But after moving in, things quickly took a turn. During their time there, they experienced a lot of paranormal activity. They heard strange sounds, heard muffled voices coming from empty rooms, and witnessed several apparitions and ghosts on the property. And Arnold's demeanor had completely changed since moving into Summerwind. He became withdrawn, and the family said it seemed like he was possessed by something in the house. Only 6 months in, that winter, Ginger Henshaw hit her breaking point. Finally, one of those cold, frigid nights, Ginger called her dad and asked for help. She said this was it. She had given up on the house and her marriage. So Ginger's dad, Raymond, came to the mansion within the next couple days and picked up Ginger and the kids. Those kids booked it at the front door. They were so ready to leave. Arnold left Summerwind the next day, and after that, Ginger and the kids never saw him again. They said that the Summerwind mansion ruined any relationship they had, but she and the kids needed to move on, and they did. In spring 1972, a few years had passed and Ginger and the kids were living in Canada, and she vowed to never go back to Summerwind ever again. Ginger sold it to someone else after moving out, a woman named Mrs. Murray. But this was strange. Mrs. Murray owned the house, but she refused to go inside. She would bring people to the home to give tours, but would not enter the place. She'd stay in the car. So, case closed, right? Far from it. In the years since Ginger moved out, her dad Raymond had a growing obsession. He could not get Summerwind out of his mind. Lord. He said the same thing as his daughter, that when he saw the home, he felt sorry for it, and it called to him. Raymond asked Miss Murray if he and his son Ray, who was unemployed at the time and looking for a new project, could tour the house. She says yes. Now, the startling thing about this is Raymond knew about what had happened to his daughter in the house. She told him about everything. The haunting, the ghosts, how it turned Arnold into someone she didn't even recognize. Ginger said that there was something dark in Summerwind. But did this stop him? No. He said he didn't believe in ghosts. This family clearly had issues listening, hearing the warnings people were giving. Friends warned Ginger that Summerwind was haunted. She didn't believe it. Now her dad was warned that it was haunted. He didn't believe it either, but he was about to. Both Raymond and Ray became infatuated with Summerwind. They were drawn to it. The two had a vision of converting the mansion into a hotel and restaurant, restoring it, and inviting in the public. Yeah, you heard me right. They wanted to bring unsuspecting guests into this place, this mansion that had a history of possessing people. Are you kidding me? So Raymond decides to buy it from Mrs. Murray. But first he's got to break the news to Ginger about his plans. So he calls her up and is like, hey, I'm gonna buy Summerwind. And she's like, what? The same Summerwind that made my life a complete nightmare? This house was pure misery for her and the kids, and her dad wants to buy it. She tells him, you can't do it. But her dad doesn't listen. He buys Summerwind and begins working on the place with his son Ray. Here we go again. The two begin calling contractors, and upon hearing that he had a mansion he wanted to convert into a hotel and restaurant, the response was always, oh yeah, we can definitely help you out with that. That's a big gig, lots of money. But then he would tell them, yeah, it's the Summerwind mansion. They'd all go, oh yeah. Actually, I don't think that's gonna work out. We're actually too busy. Click. Just like with Ginger, no one wanted anything to do with Summerwind. And not long into their work, Ray begins experiencing things inside the mansion. And one day comes home spooked from something he saw at the house, but won't tell anyone what happened. But Raymond sees that he doesn't want anything to do with the house anymore. He doesn't want to be there alone. He has lost interest. So Raymond, kind of picking up on some things here, finally knows something is wrong, so he reaches out to Mrs. Murray and gets more information on the original owner of the home. Miss Murray tells him that a man by the name of Mr. Patterson owned the place in the 1930s. Mr. Patterson lived in Summerwind with his wife, Mrs. Patterson. They were a wealthier couple. Those who visited the house and worked there would always say that they had really strange experiences inside, many telling the Pattersons that they believed the house was haunted. But the Pattersons didn't believe it. Why is no one believing anybody? I mean, you don't have to believe everything, but you should believe some stuff. This house seems to attract stubborn people, doesn't it? No one believes it's haunted until they do. And so one night, the couple was at home in the kitchen having something to eat, when suddenly they looked up to see an entity had appeared in the doorway. So Mr. Patterson whips out his gun and begins shooting at it. He shot the ghost 2 times. That's a first. I don't think I've ever covered a ghost shooting before. The 2 ran out of the house and never returned. Raymond is now saying there's something going on at Summerwind. He's finally saying the truth. One evening, Ginger met with her dad and brother to discuss plans for the mansion. She's very apprehensive but wants to support her dad and brother Ray in their new venture. During their meeting, Ginger sees that her brother Ray is really nervous. He's very bothered, he's biting his nails, he's antsy. He had been on edge since he began work on the house. And in the years since Ginger moved out of Summerwind, she began studying the paranormal, hoping to understand what happened to her at that house. And while she was studying the paranormal, she learned about hypnosis. And this is where things get even crazier. Ginger offers to hypnotize her brother. She said it was going to help him quit biting his nails. And he's like, okay. During this hypnosis session, she tells Ray to look at a pen, and he falls into a trance. And then Ray becomes possessed, okay? He begins speaking in this dark, deep, scary voice saying, "You are weak, I am strong," over and over again. The voice also made comments about despising weakness, that he was very old, and disliking his 7 children because they were so weak. Finally, I guess they had enough and they brought Ray out of the trance. When he comes to, Ginger tells him about the voice and he had no memory of it. Ray finally reveals what happened to him at the mansion that day, what spooked him so badly that he left. He said he was upstairs alone at Summerwind when he heard 2 gunshots clear as day, and then witnessed an apparition form in front of him, a male figure, and then this entity began charging at him. Now, when Raymond hears his son's experience, he's stunned, as this ties back to what Mrs. Murray had told him about the Pattersons, firing 2 shots at that entity that formed in their kitchen. Raymond is now convinced that all of this is real. He believes there's an entity trying to communicate. So what does he do? He asks his daughter to hypnotize him now, to see what possesses him, I guess. Good heavens. Word to the wise, don't do this. I have never heard of so many people rapid fire, allowing entities to possess them like this. Like, hey, who wants to be possessed next? Not good. But Ginger hypnotizes her dad now. Raymond said he was determined to find out Summerwind's secrets. So he goes into a trance, and in this hypnotized state, he sees himself inside Summerwind. He watches himself walk down to the basement of the home, and he sees there's a wooden box tucked behind the wall. And in this box, he pulls out a land grant from 1767. He looks down and sees that the owner is a man by the name of Jonathan Carver. So Ginger brings her dad back too. They now have a name and a year and a possible location of this land grant. They believe it's in the basement beneath some old stones along the wall. Raymond begins researching Jonathan Carver and finds he was a well-known explorer in the late 1700s and supposedly was given a deed to 1/3 of the state of Wisconsin. But despite searching all over Summerwind, looking for that wooden box with the land grant inside, the vision Raymond saw during his hypnosis, they never found that wooden box anywhere inside the home. That land deed was never discovered. They checked in the basement, behind the wall, but there was nothing. Even though they couldn't prove it, they believed that the entity that was tormenting the house was the ghost of Jonathan Carver, searching and wanting to find that land grant, haunting everyone inside Summerwind because this was his land. Eventually, Raymond, Ray, and Ginger decided they needed to say goodbye to Summerwind once and for all. This house had consumed them for long enough. So one day, they left, and never went back. Summerwind Mansion remaining this unsolved mystery in their minds. After they left, the house sat abandoned for years. In the summer of 1988, during a storm, lightning struck Summerwind multiple times, and the mansion burned to the ground. Only ruins remained. So the secrets of the mansion were lost forever. If the deed was somewhere inside that house, inside those walls, no one would ever find it now. Historians and descendants of Jonathan Carver have searched high and low for that deed, but they have never found it. And many have wondered if this really was the ghost of Jonathan Carver haunting Summerwind. Was there ever a land grant? Or was this someone else, another entity? Everything about the haunting of Summerwind is a mystery. Because it burned to the ground, it all feels so incomplete. And according to some, many suspected it was actually intentionally set on fire to deter visitors drawn to the haunted house. I guess we'll never know. But what happened to this family is one of the most cautionary tales I've ever heard of. If multiple people are telling you that a house is haunted, maybe take a beat, mull it over. Do you believe it was the ghost of Jonathan Carver, an explorer that was attached to the land? Or do you believe it was something else? One of the scariest aspects of this case was how much the family said Arnold changed at Summerwind. They said it was like something within the home possessed him, and that is really scary. I would love to know your thoughts and theories on this haunting. Drop them in the comments. Thank you so much for subscribing to this channel. Leave a like and a comment while you're here. And be sure to let me know what haunted spots you want to see covered next on the show. I hope each and every one of you has a great and spooky Halloween. Stay safe, and I'm looking forward to next episode. You know I have another very mysterious case coming your way. Until then, I'm Avery Ross, and this is Avery After Dark.